Willie, Katie, shocker, war starts in the Middle East, and before you know it, gasoline prices spike. Funny how quickly that happens.
I just paid $3.49 a gallon, Paul. That's like a lot more
That's
than I paid the week before.
I was going to say, you gotta, it's worth the wait. Go to Costco. I'm telling you, the gas prices are cheaper, except I haven't filled up since the conflict began, but before all of this, Canadians are going to hear this and be shocked, but I would fill up my Toyota RAV4, which has 60 liters in it, for under $30 American anytime I filled it up.
I'm just proud of you for being able to wait in that Costco gas line.
I'm so patient. I'm known for my patience.
I'm so cheap. I drove all the way from downtown D.C. out to Bethesda to tank up, and it's not cost effective, I'm going to tell you. So why is all this happening? Well, the war in Iran means ships carrying oil from the Persian Gulf can't get through the Strait of Hormuz, and that's driving up the cost of oil, which, depending on the day, is now a little over, a little under $100 US a barrel. And so gasoline prices are quickly rising as well.
And the focus of this conversation, because we are in Washington, is going to focus on the politics and sort of the political ramifications of what's going on right now. But we have to remember that, of course, there is a very real human toll to the war. According to the Iranian Red Crescent Society, more than 1,200 people have been killed in this conflict in Iran. But depending on the estimate, depending on who's giving it, it can vary. There are some estimates around 1,300 people being killed.
And the death toll around the region is ticking up, sadly, as well. The Lebanese Health Ministry estimates that about 486 people have been killed. The Israelis believe about 11 civilians have been killed. There have been people killed in the UAE and several other countries. And the war is still spiraling on. And according to Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, the military campaign is only going to get stronger and more fierce in Iran.
We will not relent until the enemy is totally and decisively defeated. But we do so. We do so on our timeline and at our choosing. For example, today will be yet again our most intense day of strikes inside Iran. The most fighters, the most bombers, the most strikes. Intelligence more refined and better than ever.
And because we're here in Washington, just 2 blocks from the person who made the call to strike Iran, and because politics is everything in D.C., we are seeing some very real political fallout from this decision on both sides of the aisle, not least because of the price of gasoline at the pump. So today we're asking, will the war in Iran become a referendum on Donald Trump? I'm Paul Hunter.
I'm Katie Simpson.
And I'm Willie Lowry, here, 2 blocks from the White House.
So I do find that gasoline prices, it's remarkable the degree of attention being paid to it. It's in every newscast. It's all over the place. Because it affects everybody, I guess. It's a sort of a tactile, tangible thing that people can...
And a point of pride for Trump.
For Trump. How many times did he say how cheap gas was? $1.99, $2.30. I think even in the State of the Union, he said...
He emphasized it.
He did.
Yeah, it's a big part of the Trump brand right now. And so all of these rising prices are against the backdrop of a non-stop conversation on affordability in this country. Every time that he talks about it, the Democrats want to talk about affordability. We've heard Donald Trump say, well, what is affordability anyway? Inflation is coming down. So we're about a week and a half into the war right now. How is it being received, the war, by Americans so far?
Not that well. The majority of Americans do not support it. They oppose it. Of course, most of the breakdown is along party lines. So you have the vast majority of Democrats, I think around 89%, against this war, while about... let me find these statistics in my chicken scratch. 85% of Republicans supported, according to a Quinnipiac poll. But the key number, as we often talk about, is those independents, 60% against it, right? So this is something that Trump is going to have to try and figure out how to change the narrative, how to convince at least those independents to get on board.
And I don't think it's probably not fair to say everything comes down to gas prices. But again, back to the tangible nature of it, and every time your car is low, you got to go to the gas station and tank up, and you think about that every single time. For context, I did the math. We talked about math last week. So I think right now, for everybody, I think the average is about $3.50 a U.S. gallon. So when you factor in the exchange rate and turn it into liters, we're talking about $1.25. In truth, I think a lot of Canadians would be happy to pay only $1.25 right now. But nonetheless, it's a big issue for everybody.
And it's something, a part of the MAGA base. We have seen Donald Trump's ability to sort of deliver a message to people who are experiencing harder economic times, who he made that promise to make life more affordable. It was the core promise of his re-election campaign. And with gas prices, with people seeing this incredible spike over the course of just, 10 days or so, it's not exactly inspiring confidence in the markets, and it's not exactly making anything easier for, Americans who are just going about their daily lives wondering, okay, is this going to be like this for a long time, or is this just a blip? Can I sort of find a way to get around it? Because right now, if you have to commute to work and, you're spending a lot of time in your car, getting your kids all around the place, you can't really do anything to avoid it.
Hence Trump emphasizing it's short term, and as says the White House broadly.
But again, short term is, what does
what
that
is
mean?
short term?
Yeah.
What is short term? We'll talk about exit strategy shortly, maybe, if there is one, or talk around it. But I'm told, Katie, you've been listening to Tucker Carlson. What's going on there?
I think that when we talk about what the divide looks like in the United States, the MAGA base is certainly divided over this. Donald Trump, and in particular J.D. Vance, the vice president, they had really campaigned on no more foreign wars, no more foreign entanglements. We're not sending your children overseas to be killed in conflict in these forever wars. And Tucker Carlson, who I'll talk a little bit about who he is in just a moment, but he is very intensely against this operation, and he's using his online platform to sort of make that point. But for Canadians probably know the name Tucker Carlson, but maybe not know where he's doing now. So Tucker Carlson for years had been a very prominent host on Fox News, one of the opinion hosts that had a primetime show that consistently drew some of the biggest ratings in all of cable news.
He called Canada Soviet Kanakistan once, did he not?
He has said all kinds of things about Canada. He parted ways with Fox News, and he's a really prominent player in this MAGA echo chamber. He's appeared on stage with Donald Trump at rallies, and during the 2024 campaign, he was a prominent person on this stage trying to sort of help Donald Trump tap into that core MAGA base, the core Fox News viewer who was, motivated to go to the polls. And now we're hearing him really go after the Trump administration over this war.
First, why did this happen? Now, in this case, there's a really simple answer. This happened because Israel wanted it to happen. This is Israel's war. This is not the United States' war. This war is not being waged on behalf of American national security objectives to make the United States safer or richer. This war is not actually even about weapons of mass destruction, nukes, chem bio. No, this war is waged purely because Israel wanted it to be waged.
Tucker Carlson has spoken like this in the past, talking about other moments in the U.S. and Israel relationship. He's been critical at times. And in this moment, he's using his considerable platform in the MAGA sort of echo chamber, that MAGA media movement, to push back against the Trump administration, illustrating that there is a divide in this moment.
So what helps the divide in MAGA? An exit, to go back to that thing we were almost talked about a few minutes ago, an exit strategy, a clear plan?
I think the sort of focus has to be on, how long this takes. Even if Donald Trump telegraphs an exit strategy, which at this point I don't ever want to make predictions around Donald Trump because we live in this moment that is incredibly unpredictable. But until there is sort of concrete change, until people see gas prices come down, until people see, service members coming home, until there's a shift there and the operation ends, I think that is going to continue to be an issue that divides MAGA, but I'm not sure an end or an exit strategy will sort of bridge that divide, because we don't know what is going to come next, and whether the United States is, even though the Trump administration says we are not getting into nation building, this is not going to be a forever war and this long-term entanglement like has been seen in other American interventions overseas. But do we think that's actually going to be the case? And
but
I don't know.
The funny thing is, what you hear from Donald Trump is that it is very complete, I think was what he said to CBS News, right? But what you hear from Pete Hegseth is that it's only just begun, right? And which leads people to think that you are there is no plan, that you don't know what tomorrow's going to bring because you don't have a plan. I think that's part of the concern, even within MAGA, who that's the OG sort of thing for Trump. They're lockstep, unified behind him. But if they're hearing these mixed messages, and if MAGA, that sort of thing that Trump could always bank on, is saying, like, what the heck is going on here?
Well, I wonder if this conflict, unilaterally decided by the Trump administration to begin with, does this represent a kind of a fundamental betrayal of the MAGA ethos, of that American first mentality, something that, of course, the president, as we've spoken about, campaigned on, championed, even if he gets out of this conflict? Does the rift repair?
To bring it back to the price of gasoline, I think we can agree that it's clear that Trump is cognizant of that and is worried about that. I think it was during the press conference in Florida this week. He's talking about maybe escorting ships through the Persian Gulf. I think there's talk about opening up oil from the strategic reserve.
But when the time comes, the U.S. Navy and its partners will escort tankers through the strait if needed. I hope it's not going to be needed, but if it's needed, we'll escort them right through.
When the White House and or Trump is talking about that, they are aware that people are kind of freaking out. So while Trump deals with division in his base, Democrats are speaking up. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer from New York echoes concerns about affordability.
When oil prices spike like this, costs ripple through the entire economy. It's not just what you pay at the pump. Airline tickets go up because fuel oil is so expensive. Shipping costs go up, so the goods on your grocery shelves go up. And American families are paying more across the board.
And I think airlines are already raising prices. And again, funny with airlines, I guess, and at gas prices, everything goes up so fast. It comes down.
It's amazing how interconnected it all is.
Well, 100%, yeah. But also, amazing and not surprising how slowly things come down. So even if this war is very complete, as Trump puts it, and it ends within 3 or 4 or 5 weeks, as the White House has hinted, the prices could still, it could take some time longer before.
And that effect we could still be feeling come November in those midterms.
100%. So, but what about Democrats, Willie? Are they united?
United-ish.
United Light.
United Light. We surprisingly saw
new beer, United Light.
During the House War Powers vote last week, we saw 4 Democrats voting with Republicans to shut it down. On the Senate side, we have John Fetterman, who's been quite vocal in his support of this military operation.
But is he a Democrat?
Well, that's
we could
a
do
good question.
A whole episode on that.
That's a very good question. But I think it will be interesting to see going forward if the Democrats try and capitalize on the vulnerability that Trump has kind of created for himself by instigating this conflict. There are openings, and will be interesting to see if the Democrats can kind of find purchase. You saw Paul's favorite word that I use.
I love it when you...
from time to time, Paul,
purchase.
From time to time.
I want to work that into my regular conversations.
You saw, we just heard Schumer there. Obviously, affordability is going to be the kind of big issue, I think, at the midterms, and the Democrats are going to try and find ways to kind of pin prices to Trump. And I think this conflict right now is obviously giving them a pretty easy one.
And Katie, I don't mean to sound crass, but politics is a crass game when you get right down to it. So, what do you think? Can Democrats kind of safely attack Trump on this?
I think that they're going to sort of use this moment as long as the cost of living remains high in the United States. Remember, there was a cost of living crisis before this started, and gas prices had been one of the things, we've talked about this extensively, it's been one of the things that Donald Trump had pointed to as a success in his term, was the lowering of gas prices. As long as Americans continue to exist in a moment where grocery prices are up, gas prices are up, I think that you will see a message about the economy from Democrats, and they will blame Donald Trump's war in Iran, a war, framing it sort of as a war of choice. And they will point to that as say, listen, this is not, we present a different vision. And then they'll talk about the measures that they would go about to lower the cost of living and sort of use that to help draw people to their party in the hopes it'll help them come November.
Because wallets matter.
They do. They motivate people. And I think a lot of the context around the 2024 election is who Donald Trump was able to motivate to go to the polls that don't necessarily always participate in American elections. And whether this kind of conflict, whether it's driving up the cost of living, whether more American soldiers are coming home in caskets and horrible things like that, or whether the ongoing devastation in Iran is something that Americans are frustrated with or angry about.
Or whether gasoline costs more.
Exactly.
Is the
exactly.
literal bottom line.
Is all of that enough for those people that showed up that don't normally show up to say, listen, it's the same old. We've seen this from government or administration after administration before. What is different? This is why I don't participate, because they cynically don't have any trust in the government.
So even if you don't vote Democrat, you just stay home, because what's the point?
And that could be as much of a boost for a Democrat as someone willing to vote for the Democrats.
Finding a way to go back to our thesis for the week, ultimately less a referendum on this conflict and yet again another referendum on the economy and affordability, but because of this conflict, sort of.
Yeah.
Let's talk geopolitics. Willie.
Paul.
Make me smarter.
Impossible. Not because you're not smart,
I love
but
you,
you're
man.
too smart.
But there are broader implications here globally, correct?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, any time you talk about oil, right, that is got geopolitical implications. We know that China gets a lot of its oil from Iran. It's obviously not happy with what's transpiring at the moment, though they've been pretty careful to criticize the conflict but not criticize Trump. And then, of course, you have Russia, obviously a close ally of Iran. We have reports earlier this week or late last week, I don't even know what day it is anymore, guys, that Russia is actually providing Iran with intelligence that has helped them locate U.S. troops in the region to target. And that was
Hegseth says he knows. They know everything.
Yeah.
They know everybody who's talking to everybody else. But yeah, go ahead. Keep going.
He really, yes. We actually got a question along that line from a listener named Deborah Moy. She was asking just how Russia would play into the war. I think that's kind of how we're seeing it thus far. I would imagine that Moscow, I pronounced that correctly, it would be a little hesitant to get any more involved publicly than kind of on the kind of down low via intelligence. But we'll have to see. I mean, this is the thing about conflict and war is you can only control it so much, right? You just don't know how it will grow, spiral, ebb and flow.
And the other thing that is sort of unfolding as we speak is the United States is lifting temporarily some of its sanctions.
I was just going to mention that against Russia.
Yeah, against Russia. So it makes it easier for Russia to sell oil, which helps bolster its ability to fight the war in Ukraine. So that, again, and Ukraine at the same time is trying to help the Americans and the Israelis when it comes to defending against Iranian drones. So if anyone who's been focusing on when are we going to see a solution to the war in Ukraine, which the unjustified war that Russia began, all of that hope or all of that momentum, if it was leading anywhere, it sort of is a big distraction. What's going on now, it doesn't necessarily help get those parties together there.
Meanwhile, Canada, a week ago, Katie, we were hearing from you from Ottawa. You're filling in at Power and Politics. Canadian government's response to the war has evolved over the course of the last week or so. How would you say Mark Carney's government is navigating comms around this one?
I think the Prime Minister introduced himself to Canadians as a baked human pretzel. I think that statement sort of started in one spot and then it kept and yes and yes and yes and like an improv sketch and continued. Started in one spot and then ended in a much different spot. At first, the Canadian response was almost immediate, and it was signaling the main message coming out of that was signaling support for the American and Israeli operations in Iran. But the emphasis was on, we support ensuring that Iran never has a nuclear weapon. And then Mark Carney was traveling abroad. He was on this massive trade trip to India, Australia, and Japan. And every day that passed, he sort of had to add a layer of nuance, and that might be a very generous description, a layer of nuance to what the Canadian government's position was. Well, he added, it's not a blank check. And what we see, we're not quite sure if it's consistent with international law. And, sort of lamenting the rupture and sort of the rules-based order, which he had talked about during his now very famous speech at Davos about, how you can't mourn for the past. We are in a new reality, and nostalgia is not, a strategy.
The rupture speech.
The rupture speech about, we are living in this different world and we have to treat it as it is rather than what we want it to be. While Mark Carney was on this trip to sell Canada and develop new relationships or rekindle relationships, the story of that trip will be Mark Carney's evolving conversation around what the Canadian government's response is.
All right, good chatting, you two. Another fun convo. Before we go, a listener named Penny Kaziuka sent us a nice note about the podcast, and in her note, she's wondering how we keep our heads above water. Here's a quote. The rest of us have the privilege to walk away when the news comes too heavy. How are you able to keep your heads above water? Willie, hit me.
Still figuring it out. No, I think
it's a good question.
This is going to sound perhaps a little cold, and it's not meant to, but this is my job. And so I take that seriously, and, I've kind of, as I've grown older, grown more adept at kind of compartmentalizing a lot of what I do and what I see. Here, in the relative safeties and comfort of our little studio in Washington, D.C., in general, is one thing. The news and what we see and hear is so kind of omnipresent. But, I get to go home, I get to hug my little girls, and kind of most of that falls to the wayside. That's a lot different than when I cover conflict and I'm actually physically in a place where then you're dealing with both the kind of potential, that kind of scary threat of personal danger, where here I get to mostly just deal with the theoretical. So two different things, and when my beautiful little girls aren't enough to take my mind off it, I just run until I can't stand up anymore.
I was going to say, did it get harder to do once you had your kids?
Yes and no, because in a weird way, before I had my kids, I didn't turn off, right? But now that I have my kids, I try to the best of my ability to put my phone away and just focus on them. But it's, the problem is cell phones are they're insidious, right? So it's it's always right next to me, and I just have to flip it up and then...
Just don't look at your cell phone. Really. I'm joking.
It's so hard, though.
Katie,
Management's about to tase you, Paul, for saying that.
Katie, how do you keep your head above water?
I've learned some lessons in 2025. I feel like 2025 in terms of, stress management, I feel like I was not making the best choices in order to make sure that I could manage it. Much like you, Willie, I find that, dealing with the subject matters that we deal with, and we never know what it's going to be, we know that going in. We know it's going to be hard, and we sort of signed up for that, and so it's sort of expected. What I really struggled with last year was the volume and the pace, particularly because it was a year where so much was at stake for Canada with tariffs. It still continues to be that. And I say this quite regularly, but you never know what kind of day it's been until Donald Trump has gone to bed. And so the number of times, and I know, Paul, this is a thing for you too, where you get a phone call at 10:30 at night, 11:30 at night. There's massive breaking news. We need you to come back. And it directly affects Canada. Come back. And I found that last year, I was not getting enough sleep. I was not prioritizing things outside of work to ensure that I could have some balance. And so this year I've done I've done a few things that I really think have helped. Recognizing sort of my mantra is I can only control what I can control. I know I'm going to have to work late. We regularly work 60 to 70 hours a week. We work on days off. That's never going to change. But my non-negotiables are I walk to and from work. And I've had an on and off relationship with that since I moved to Washington. It's 45 minutes each way. Listen to a lot of Fleetwood Mac lately.
Oh, nice.
And then the other thing I've done is I've meal prepped. I have not purchased lunch once in 2026, with the one exception in Ottawa, with one exception when I was backfilling in Ottawa, which was out of my control. But it's like I can control that I'm getting focusing on proper nutrition and proper sleep, because by the time I get home after my walk, I'm tired. Like last night, I finished work. I got home by 9:45 p.m. I was so tired. I had a big glass of water and just went to bed, which that's why everyone should sign up to be a foreign correspondent, because your life is so exciting. You get home at 9:45, you're so exhausted that you just have a big glass of water and go to bed.
And I've been
really.
I've been asleep for an hour by then.
What do you do, Paul?
What I like is when I go home to Canada, people come up and say that they appreciate the coverage from here, and I think that I take that to heart, and I'm grateful to learn that going through the kind of days that you just described, Katie and Willie, matters, and I think I take comfort in that, and that helps. It helps you get up the next day, not to overstate it, because it's a job, as you say, Willie.
Yeah, but it's a job, but it's also it's an important one, and I think that's the fun thing about working for the CBC is you can get that sense of fulfillment, right? In part, it's a little bit like a duty.
Now, speaking of people appreciating, particularly Paul Hunter,
Fair enough. Here we go,
and particularly the podcast. As you know, I was in Ottawa hosting Power and Politics last week, and our colleague Jerry, who works at Power and Politics, he brought this to me and he put it on my desk and said, "Would you bring it back to Paul Hunter?"
I think I know what this is going to be.
I think you know what it's going to be too, and you can show it for the cameras and we'll describe it. We'll describe it for those of us listening on a podcast.
It's a T-shirt.
And it
Close
says,
your eyes and think of maple syrup.
Yes.
That came out of my mouth, I think, a few episodes ago. I love it.
It did. You have to wear that next week, by the way.
I'll wear it next week.
I hope we're not talking about war and you're wearing a shirt that says that.
Thanks to our loyal listener, Jerry. Jerry in Ottawa.
Jerry in Ottawa.
All right, where are we? We are saying thanks to Penny for sending that question. And if you have a question for us or feedback on what you're hearing, send us an email or what the heck, send us a voice memo, because 2026. Or you can leave us a comment on Spotify, and don't forget to follow us on your favorite podcast app. Thanks, Katie. Thanks, Willie. We'll do it again next week.
Thanks, Paul.
Thanks, Paul.